This video is brought to you by our amazing supporters over at Patreon. Hey everyone, it's Ben from Board to Bits, and in this video we're going to be playing through a mod of Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past called Link to the Past Randomizer. And this is really going to be kind of a case study in the idea of procedural generation and a really unique way that you can approach procedural generation. In most cases we think of procedural generation in things like Minecraft, where you have like completely customized maps, or in like NetHack or games like that where they regenerate different dungeons or different worlds every single time you play them. Or at least the idea of like regenerating the residents of the world, like different monsters or different item types and things like that. Link to the Past Randomizer does this a little bit differently. It uses the exact same items as the original game does. The maps don't change at all. The positions of enemies and the enemies that you face don't change at all. All that changes is that all of the items you get, the major items that appear in dungeons, in chests, as well as things like the heart pieces that appear on the overworld and events like improving your sword, all of those get rearranged. And so it's like I say, it's a very different take on procedural generation, but it works really interestingly and it creates a really interesting game experience, particularly if you've played Link to the Past before. It creates really a new game for you to play each time. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to create myself a new save file, and we'll start this up. So if you haven't played Link to the Past before, it's a fairly kind of structured game. Like particularly the first half of it, really, you have to go to Hyrule Castle and save Princess Zelda, and then you go to 3 different dungeons in a very specific order. You can't even reach like the second dungeon until you've completed the first, so on and so forth. And then when you get to the second half of the game, it starts to open up a little bit more. But that completely changes with this. So in this first room here, we have one chest here, and traditionally speaking, if you open up this chest, you get the lantern. But because everything's been randomized, we're going to get something else here. And in this case, we got just a rupee. There are some of the chests are seeded, or some of the items are seeded with just like single or multiple rupees, or bomb refills and things like that. Others are actually items. So this one wasn't really a great grab for us on our first move, but that's okay. So the start here plays pretty similarly to the normal beginning of Legend of Zelda, where you go to Hyrule Castle. We will still get the sword from our uncle as the first thing. That's actually a setting you can do when you create your randomized game. I'll include a link in the description to where you can actually create your own custom or your own randomized ROMs of this. There's a few steps you have to go through, but it's pretty easy. And there are ways you can do it where it can require glitches and things, in which case you might not even go to Hyrule Castle right away. But in my case here, I'm just going to play this somewhat vanilla. You see, Uncle has the sword still, so I automatically get him. You'll also notice, if you've played the original Link to the Past, there's not a lot of dialogue going on here, and that's because this is really designed for a lot of speed running too, in this case. And so they've really eliminated a lot of any like dialogue and things like that. Also a lot of like the animations when you get items. So if you hadn't gotten... This is something kind of interesting that they did in the original Link to the Past, which was if you didn't go and open that chest in your room in the first part of the game and didn't get the lantern there, this chest here would actually have the lantern. So if I open this one, I'll see what they have in here. Got the Moon Pearl. Not super useful at this moment, but it's actually a really cool thing to get early on, because that's going to give me the ability to actually function if I go to the Dark World, which is nice. I am not by any means the best, or certainly not like a speedrun level player of Link to the Past, so we'll just kind of see what's going on here. Actually, this part here, the game plays pretty much like the vanilla game, so I might speed through this a little bit until I get to another chest. So keys that you get, if they're dropped by enemies, you still get them the same as you would. These are typically in situations like this where there's a specifically the same room has the key in the door. They don't change those up. But any keys inside of a dungeon, any keys and the dungeon items like the map, the compass, and the big key will actually all be randomized among the chests in that dungeon. So let me open up this one. Now this is actually where you typically got the boomerang, I believe was right here. In this case I got some bombs, which again doesn't seem super exciting. You can get bomb refills on the overworld. However, it's actually pretty cool to get them this early because I believe in the original Link to the Past, you don't get bombs when you're first in Hyrule Castle. And that is actually... that means that there's a couple of spots you can't get into later on here. Alright, once again, I'm just going to fast forward here. So I fast forwarded through all this because there really wasn't anything that exciting. That chest just had a red rupee up above. One more chest here. Let's see what I get. Key. Not super exciting. And I got Princess Zelda, as usual. So I'll fast forward again. Yeah, this gets more interesting once we get to the overworld itself, so I'll probably fast forward here until there is one room in here that's actually pretty interesting, but I'll talk to you when we get there. So one quick thing to note here is that the base game would normally not let you open this door until you got the lantern, and again, there were multiple places you could get the lantern throughout the castle. If you didn't get it in the first one, it would just kind of move to the second and third. So technically speaking here, we should walk into pitch darkness, but because the game has assumed that you have the lantern at this point, it actually does give you some light here. However, in future dungeons, if I am in a completely dark room and I don't have the lantern, I just won't be able to see. Okay, so here's the interesting room, and this is where the bombs actually come into play. So far, the chests in Hyrule Castle have not given much at all. We got that Moon Pearl, but aside from that, it's all just been rupees, which is kind of lame, actually, and not great for the point I'm trying to make with this playthrough, but that's okay. So here we have 3 chests, though, so this is usually something hopefully interesting here. We've got Titan's Mitt, which is really nice. That means that we're going to be able to pick up rocks. Normally you don't get that until you get through the second dungeon. A bottle, never hurts. And the map. Has to be somewhere in the dungeon, so not that unusual to find it there. Now, one thing to note too about the way that the items are kind of randomized is that they're not completely random. The game will not create situations where it is impossible, like where a door is locked and the only way to get to the key is to go through the said locked door. That was just a improvement on bomb capacity. But yeah, so we're basically like the randomizer won't create completely impossible situations. It may create situations where you need to glitch out the game. However, there are settings when you're creating your ROM that will say, do you want to require glitches? Do you want no glitches? I'm playing currently a no glitch version of the game that also does your uncle guarantees that your uncle will give you a sword. You can play the game where the uncle at the beginning is actually randomized too, so you might get some random item from him as well. Okay, so the first thing I often do, and a lot of players do, is go to Kakariko Village from here, because there's actually a lot of kind of free stuff you can get here. The first one I'm going to do is down here. If you jump down this hole, traditionally there is a piece of heart on this ledge here, or there's a chest here, and it's got a piece of heart. In this case, though, we'll see what we get. I actually got the improved power glove, so now I have the highest level glove, so I can pick up dark and light rocks, which is pretty cool. More money. Blue tunic just improves my defense a little bit, and the Quake medallion, I believe that is. Which I don't actually know if I can use yet. Let's find out. Because I don't have the Master Sword. I know you can't get them without the Master Sword, but... Oh yeah, no, I can still use it. Cool. Sorry, Kakariko Village. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. I have 100, just barely have 100 gold, so I can get what he will normally give you a bottle. I'll talk to him. Got some arrows, not really worth 100 gold, but that's fine. I can go up to Blind's hut here. He's got some good stuff usually. So really it changes, this also changes the metagame a lot. Whereas in the original game, you were at this point kind of on a mission to find this elder, Sahasrara, and you went to Kakariko Village to kind of get some information about where he might be. Now, you are instead really coming here because, and you're trying to kind of loot all of the items that you can possibly get. Got the shovel, that's nice. And money. And so you kind of find out what places on the overworld map have the most stuff. Kakariko Village is obviously one of those here. And then you kind of use that opportunity to... oh, sweet, Pegasus boots. To just kind of equip yourself as much as possible early on, which suddenly... You know, this would probably have given me just like a lot of rupees or maybe some heart pieces, but it wouldn't really have given me a lot of items, whereas randomizing it now, it gives you a lot of this other stuff. So getting the shovel and the Pegasus boots, which is actually kind of a huge win there, because that means that I can get both whatever is in the library as well as what's in the Flute Kid's grotto. Let's open this up. Got a shield, that's nice. That's another thing, you don't actually automatically get a shield from your uncle like you do in the vanilla game, so finding a shield is kind of nice. And this kid here normally requires you, or still requires you to have a bottle in order to get his item. It won't necessarily be the bug catching net, but in this case, it's just actually an arrow upgrade, but if you didn't have a bottle, he still wouldn't give you whatever his item was. Okay, is there anyone else here? I think that's all. I always get into a trap of going into the chicken shack there, and there's not really anything there to speak of. So I'm going to continue down here, continue my item getting. But if you've played the original Legend of Zelda at all, you know that at this point, having not gone to the first dungeon even, I would have the lantern, my sword, a shield, and really that's about it. But now, in this case, and I'll jump back to that in a second, you can see that I've already got now bombs. I might have bombs too. I've got one of the medallions, I've got the shovel, which is going to be really useful. I've got a lot of my kind of utility items down there, the Pegasus boots, the upgraded power glove, and the moon pearl. So and I've already got an improvement to my armor. So you could really kind of front end a lot of stuff that you would normally be getting throughout the course of the game. So this is just a cluster of bombs, not super useful. I'll get it now because I already have the Pegasus boots, but if I didn't have it, honestly, it would be kind of a place that I would check and see, oh, I don't really need to come back to the library for that. But I'll get them this case. Which actually is a little bit useful because I can use that to go to the bomb this kid's wall and do the race here to get whatever, get whatever item they have. Which may or may not be worth it, but it's 15 seconds out of my life, I can handle that. So like I say, they've changed a lot of the dialogue to kind of simplify it, just to help speedrunners. Yeah, it's just 10 arrows, so not really worth it, but I can take this trash. But otherwise the game, like all of the mechanics of the game are the same. You know, if someone required an item for you to do something, like the witch that requires the mushroom to make the magic powder, you still have to give her a mushroom to get whatever random item she's going to give you. All those things are still in place. It's just a matter that simply changing the order really changes what you can do in the game. And that is just a really interesting take on procedural generation, rather than thinking of it having to, you know, create new stuff. Like, it's not creating anything new. It's literally just reordering how you get it. There we go. Oh, sweet, got the bow. That is actually really useful. I did a run of this without the bow where I could not... kind of got me to a point where I couldn't do... You can't actually finish the first dungeon of the game, Eastern Palace, without the bow because you can't get to the boss room without the bow. You could actually beat the boss without the bow, but you can't get to his room without the bow. So it's nice to get the bow for that reason. Oh yeah, but the one thing I did want to talk about is also that they do, not only do they change the arrangement of all of the equipment items you get, but they actually change which dungeon has each kind of either pendant or crystal. So if I go back to the map here and zoom out, we see that in this case, normally it would be the green pendant in the Eastern Palace, and then down to the bottom left in the desert would be, I believe, the blue pendant. And then actually the red pendant is normally to the north, although the red and blue might be switched. But regardless, in this case here now, we see that 2 of the crystals from the second half of the game are already here, and the pendant is still up to the north there. And that actually completely changes how you play the game as well, because technically speaking, in order to win the game, you do not need to get the 3 pendants and go get the Master Sword, unless there's an item there that happens to be game critical. And there's sort of a list, and you can find these online or just by watching speedruns of that. There are certain items that are critical to the game. Like, for example, I don't think you can win the game without, say, the... there are ways to do it without the hook shot, for example, but you might need, like, the cape, or you might need the ice rod, I think you need to defeat one of the bosses, things like that. So the arrangement of which crystals are where actually really affects whether or not you have to finish which dungeons you have to complete to finish the game. So once again, it's all in this one simple change of reordering, not even changing how they work, not changing which items you get, like not limiting certain items or not. It's just changing what order you get them in. That completely changes how this game is played. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit and get to another place that has some good items. And then I'm thinking maybe I'll go to the first dungeon just to kind of show how that works. Or maybe I'll go just to the Dark World since I can now. But yeah, here, I'll fast forward here and then we can talk in a minute when I actually get to this next cave. So this is sometimes called the Hype Cave because there's these 4 chests in it, and so there's a lot of potential to get stuff. Got the ice rod, that's nice. Heart piece. Whole heart. Not a great pull, but again, like it's just the meta now of knowing which places have these things that makes it kind of changes what order you're going to go do things in. Fast forward again here. This is an interesting cave in the vanilla game. This is actually where you get the ice rod, and it's like the one item that's really like just kind of in a random cave and kind of tucked in the corner of the world. It's not one that you get in a dungeon at all. So we'll see what's in here. Heart piece, not bad. I've got half a heart. Okay, and so normally speaking at this point, like, I could not go to, say, the, if I were to go to the, well, I couldn't even get to the Dark World normally at this stage of the game. But in this case, I could, if I wanted to. However, I don't have the magic mirror, which would, oh, that's going to be annoying. I'll tell you what, I'm going to fast forward, see if I can get some hearts, and then once I get those, I will talk again. Okay, so yeah, like right now I could go to the Dark World. Unfortunately, I don't have the magic mirror to get me back from the Dark World, so that would actually kind of not be great. So I'm not going to do that, but it's like, it's interesting that I could, if I really wanted to, I could go to the Dark World. It's all these like really random situations that normally like the game wouldn't let you get into, that you can kind of decide, hey, do I want to try? Maybe I would risk going to the Dark World. I could technically reset the game to get out of it, which is kind of metagaming a little bit, but that's fine. It's an interesting. It makes it such an interesting way to play this game. So I'm just going to do this quickly because it reveals one more item, and I'm right here. Which was a lot of money, but not anything that great. And so now we'll go to the first dungeon and just see what's different about it now that in the situation that we're in here. So like I say, dungeons are treated a little bit differently in terms of the randomization. All of the same keys that were in this dungeon are still in this dungeon. They don't get like moved elsewhere. Because unlike the original Legend of Zelda, keys are kind of dungeon specific. However, everything, like the position of those keys has been changed, and the other items that you can get here are changed, and the big item would normally have been the bow and arrow, which I've already gotten. So there is clearly some other item, which is the big, quote-unquote, big item of this dungeon. So like right there, I just automatically got the big key already, which normally I wouldn't get until, elsewhere in the dungeon itself. So now I could go right to the big chest or any big doors and open them right away. Let's see what else I can get out of this dungeon. These guys are just a lot easier to kill with jars than anything else. Because, as you saw before, they jump away from your sword, but are dumbfounded by the idea of jars. Another chest. Let's see what's in here. Well, looks like there's not a lot great to get from this. From this dungeon. That was probably the quote-unquote big item of the dungeon. Let me just see what's in here. Map, yeah. And unfortunately, at this point, I'm a little bit stuck because I don't have that lantern yet. And so those dark rooms... Actually, I can even show you this. Whereas, traditionally, I would have the lantern right now, and I would be able to kind of see my way through. In this case, if I go down here, I just don't see anything. And I'm going to start getting hit by those enemies. In fact, well, the door closed behind me and I got stuck and killed. So that kind of goes to show you that while a lot of stuff seems like, oh, I can go a lot farther, this is a lot easier now, I have all this great stuff, sometimes you don't get a really simple early item that completely like kind of hamstrings you at a spot like that. I'm not going to go play any further at this point, but I'll just talk a little bit more about this. So, there's actually ways that you can play this to make it more difficult too. Like there's a no swords variant where there's basically 4 spots where you get your sword, you get the master sword, you improve your sword, and then you, I think you make your sword magical is the last one, or something like that. And those are interspersed throughout the world as well. Like in my case, I have it so that the uncle still gives you your first sword no matter what, but you can either get rid of that, in which case you might go through a good chunk of the game without a sword, which completely changes how you have to deal with enemies. You have to either avoid them or use things like bombs and arrows and stuff to stop them. There's also a completely no sword variant where those 4 particular randomization slots get replaced with, I think it's either more money or something like that, so that you just are going through the entire game and you know you're never going to have a sword. And so things like that, like it's a really cool on both sides that you can get better stuff earlier on and completely change how you're going to play your game, but it can also change how you play your game because you're not getting the stuff you need, and you have to kind of, like right now, you can technically do those dark rooms just by kind of feel, but what I probably need to do at this point is go to other dungeons, solve them, and then come back to this later on when I do have the lantern, if I do need, and I would in fact need to finish this dungeon eventually, because I need all 7 of those crystals in order to get into Ganon's tower and ultimately win the game. So once again, just this simple action of rearranging where items are completely changes the order, the metagame, all of how Link to the Past is played. And this is a game that I used to play kind of like once a year, if not more frequently, just because I've enjoyed it so much. And this kind of breathes this whole new life into it with this one really simple change. So it's a way that you could look at designing your own games, and if you're thinking about adding some sort of procedural generation to them, this is a way that you could do that without having to create all new maps or all new enemies, or doing content generation with procedural generation. It's just changing a structural order, kind of keeping some logic to it so you don't make the game impossible, but it completely will change the experience your players will have with your game. So that was Link to the Past, a randomizer. Hope you've enjoyed watching this, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.